Hello and welcome to Tripping on Legends, episode 12. Tentatively, I think called, Tripping on the Singing River?
That's too long.
Too long?
That's way too long. It does not flow off. Tripping on the river?
Tripping on
Tripping the river?
Tripping the river?
No,
I don't know. We'll work something out. But this is the episode that would not end, would not die, would not record. We started talking about tripping this legend in November.
November, yeah.
It was either November or it was during because the Christmas time was the Mary episode, right? Where we did the Bloody Mary legend.
This is October, November. This is
like one of the original. This is like the OG episode 2.
What does
which
that
was
mean,
called
OG?
Original Gangster.
Original Gangster.
Yeah. I have a little more street cred than Natalie does. By the way, I'm your host, Crist from Balzano.
And I'm Natalie, Crist.
Who is not a gangsta at all.
I'm not a gangster.
As we've come to find out.
Look, I can't even say gangsta, not a gangster.
Gangster. So this, we first hinted at this, episode 2, which was called Love in the Lights, right? Love something in the lights.
Possibly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so the good news is, as of 2 weeks ago, we've tripped all of the things that we talked about in that episode.
We have. Wow, that's incredible.
Which is pretty cool.
I cannot say that I've done that for anything else in life.
I know, it only took us like 27 months to do it, but still. Okay, so
6 months.
6 months. So, I guess a little bit of history for why it's been such a long time in between episodes is that we have started this recording several different times. Mm-hmm. We started it on the way back from it. Mm-hmm. First of all, we should say that we tried to visit what we thought was the site. So I guess, we should probably... We're talking about the Singing River, the legend of the Singing River.
Singing River is on the Manatee River in Bradenton, Florida. So
we'll talk all about the legend and what it is, but just so that people know some context, we're talking about the Native American legend of the Singing River, which is in part of the Manatee River in Manatee County in Bradenton, Florida. We tried to get what we thought was a location when we visited Oak Ridge Cemetery.
Right.
And it was closed, which is kind of a theme for this legend for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even back in whatever it was, January, whenever we went there, but it was okay because we're like, the legend takes place
in May,
in April and May,
right?
And then we found out even more May than April, but
then we found out we were in the wrong location altogether.
Which is fine because we never actually made it to that location, so we were planning to go to the wrong location,
right?
But this is a show called Tripping on Legends, mm-hmm. and the funniness of it's supposed to be that we're supposed to make mistakes. That's part of the path of this. So We're not legend tripping. We are legend tripping, but the idea behind it is that we make mistakes along the way. And
it's all part of the experience.
This is a great example of that.
Right.
But it's also, we found a lot of little gems. Mm-hmm. So we initially didn't... we weren't able to get to the location, which was the wrong location. We got there. We started to record on the way back. And I think we got distracted by some conversations about old 80s music.
It was early 90s music.
Early 90s music.
Moby and Gwen Stefani.
Yes, that's what it was. Moby. Southside.
Yeah, and I was like, what are you talking about? And then he had to stop the recording so he could play Southside for me while I sat there in 5 minutes of like, what am I will never get that 5 minutes back. Ever.
I'm going to continue to argue that Moby song, while I'm not a huge Moby fan, that Southside is a pretty...
It was kicking.
Damn good song. And we tried to record a follow-up to it the next day. Mm-hmm. And we got some gold.
We did.
And we've lost that recording.
It's gone.
It's gone. Through a series of not paranormal or weird circumstances, but just end of the year school stuff and files got lost.
And then...
Yes.
We did TOL with kids. Tripping on Legends kid style.
Which we're still going to do the episode where we talk about that. But it's going to be a much shorter episode without our kids rambling.
which is sad.
Which is sad because they ramble well.
There was some ramble gold there. They were gelded.
They were gelded to the gills, yes.
We really got the kids engaged. At first, they were, they had begged to please let us trip with you, and we thought this one was going to be like the safest, most, nurturing location that we could bring them.
Right.
Not creepy, because the ages range from 4 to 12. So, we really got them engaged at first, and then on the car ride up, they're like, "What are we doing? No, we don't want to do this." Circumstances, we got to where we were going, and it was closed. The historical village that we tried to visit was shut down, and so that kind of dampened their spirits. Just killed them.
Okay. But basically, we're just saying that to tell you because we're going to do an episode 13. It's going to be tripping on kids,
and they had such
which
good ideas.
Which not only describes our experiences with legend tripping with them, but generally what happens whenever we're around and all our kids are there. We're pretty much tripping on them all the time. So that's going to be episode 13. So don't give away too much.
All right, fine.
We want to keep them coming back.
It was really great stuff. We had them all asking questions and engaged.
It is, and it's going to be really good material for episode 13.
Fine.
But I think it's part of the narrative of this legend for us is that we've been trying to do this and trying to get it down, trying to get it recorded and put out there, and we keep falling on our faces getting it done.
Like, when did we go?
We went, tomorrow will be 2 weeks ago is when we went.
With the kids?
No, we went last week with the kids.
And then we were there the week following?
And then we were there the week before.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
The week following would be the future, would be tomorrow.
You know what I meant. It is late. You are not allowed to grammatically correct me.
At that, I wasn't correcting your grammar. I was correcting your
speech.
Yeah. So, moving ahead. Don't. This is a family podcast. You can't be using those words.
I was saying hi to Richard.
Oh, okay. So, it's been a long path just to get the information and the episode. And a lot has gone into it. Like, I think this is probably our most researched
oh, for sure.
Story that we've uncovered. If only reason because some folklorists have kind of walked in the footsteps. Like, it was easy with the Devil's Tree. Like, there was a lot on the internet, and it really was pretty much the same story.
But this
was
thing over and over again. And,
right.
And it was very paranormal based, I think, anyways, the Devil's Tree. It was a Native American legend, so it's been around for 1,000 years.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? I think that was really a good pull.
And it was really hard, honestly, to get the location, to find out where the location was, and which we'll get into in a little bit. We found out that there was 2 legends that were kind of mixed and intertwined with each other. One was an older legend, and one was a more recent. By more recent, we're talking about 1700s. 1700s, yeah. And so to try to separate what the stories were between the 2 different legends and which was attributed, but it's
and why was it the same location? That's just really cool stuff. But
right, and this also involved getting an ancient text. Not a text message, but an ancient. You're holding the ancient text in your hands right now.
It's from the 80s.
Okay, well that's pretty ancient for us.
You're from the 70s. What does that make you?
Older than dirt. So, originally we received an email from our fishing expedition, our legend fishing expedition, and a librarian pointed us in the direction of this.
Is that the PH fishing?
No. Pointed us in the direction of the legend and photocopied parts of a book. And I was able to actually, using interlibrary loan, get that book because it's ridiculously priced on Amazon, and it is called. The Singing River, I believe, but who are the name?
The Singing River by Joe Warner.
Joe Warner and his wife, who's mentioned in
Libby Warner.
Libby Warner, who were great historians, and who did a lot to document kind of like not only legends like the Singing River, but also historical things. Like, the book is really just using the Singing River as a way to talk about a lot of historical information from Manatee County.
Right.
They're very, they're dead, because that was the first thing I did when I got the stuff, was trying to get in contact with them, but
Can you be a little
they've
bit
passed.
more PC?
I'm sorry. They've moved gently into that good night.
They're dead.
They're dead. And yeah, and they're very much into documenting like the cracker legend nature of things.
What does that mean, the cracker legend?
What is cracker? The best I can tell, being from New England, is that a cracker is a Caucasian who was born and has lived their life in Florida.
Okay. Gotcha.
And so there's a deep tradition of that, especially in this area.
Okay.
And so you have like what they call cracker legends, and these people documented a lot of those. So so the book really only has probably about 7 pages that really are important to us. But it was good. It was just good to like touch that book, and I'll retweet out or repost the pictures of the book itself, because it's pretty cool. It's in a plastic bag. I'm not supposed to have it outside of the plastic bag at any time except for when I'm reading it, which I thought was hilarious because the bag is not sealed.
No,
So
it's
it really
just like a
does
Ziploc
nothing.
bag,
It really is in
yeah.
like just a giant, like a quart Ziploc bag. Offers it no protection whatsoever.
No.
And it's been in my backpack for over a month now because
Well, and it makes you wonder why too. I mean, there was 3 printings. The first was in the 80s, and the last one being in 1992. So it just must not been widely circulated, and so that's why. I mean, I don't really understand.
yeah, I mean,
why
it's
it
like
has to be.
why it's so
protected.
expensive, right? And why it's so expensive online. So, although if you look, it's funny if you look on Amazon. I think one of my books is up to $5,000.
Holy moly!
Which is hilarious because like I have like 7 copies in my room of the same my classroom, I should say. So so it all begins with a legend.
Well,
so the legend
shall
of
I read the legend?
why don't we do you want to read it? I mean, because it's kind of long, but you have such a beautiful reading voice that.
I mean, I really do.
Okay, so and now Natalie Crist and the Legend of the Singing River.
Thank you. Questions after. The great river of the mystic music was an unwritten boundary between 2 large Indian nations.
Am I allowed to interrupt?
Are you ever allowed to interrupt?
No, I'm saying, like, can I add things as you're reading?
Of course.
Okay, can I just say one huge thing? Because I say this to my students all the time.
Sure.
Can you not bend the bind? That's what breaks the binding of the book.
Sorry.
No problem. I don't go to your house and bend your stuff. Go ahead. Continue.
I beg to differ. Anyways, the 2 large Indian nations were the Timucuans to the north of the Great River and the Calusa to the south. The Medicine Spring on the south bank of the Great River was the location of the Calusa village. If you want to jump in here and let them know that we visited that.
That's right. That was one of our primary goals, was like we wanted to find that Medicine Spring.
And we did.
And we did. And it's not so springy.
Not so springy.
Not so springy.
The old ruling Calusa chief had a very beautiful daughter who was his pride and joy. Her hand was sought by many, a brave warrior, but she accepted none. Once upon a moon, the tribe to the north came across the great river to trade and visit. It was soon apparent that the dusky maiden and the Timucuan chief's son had fallen in love and were together for many pleasant days.
Okay, can I stop you for 1 second here?
Sure.
So one of the things that one of the problems is going to be that we've had so much time to reflect on this and to find other information that it's kind of how to organize this episode is going to be kind of difficult. So it's going to kind of be stream of conscious at some points. But I don't remember you saying in anything that you just said that they were warring. It just said 2 different tribes and it said they would even trade with each other once a month.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what we should say is we've tracked this almost identical legend to the Mississippi River as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in contact with a writer who has used that as inspiration of novels and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was incredible.
And so there are elements of this that are going to sound very familiar. And I always, until just now, when you were reading it, have thought of these two tribes as warring with each other, that they didn't
And I
get
think
along.
we've
And I
said
think
that
we've come
before,
across something that says it, but at least how it's documented in this, they are
Maybe
not
they didn't
enemies.
start warring until after.
Why, Natalie? What's going to happen?
That was perfectly timed, and your tone was on point. Okay, it was time for the northern tribe to depart. Having the courage to approach the stern Calusa chief to ask his daughter's hand in marriage, the young warrior told the old chief of his home on a beautiful lake to the north, which we don't know the location of the Timbuktuan village. We never did find that out.
No.
Instead of consenting, the old chief flew into a rage and ordered the young brave to immediately leave the village and never return. During the night, the young warrior had a secret rendezvous beside the great river with his lovely maiden, vowing to return to her in one moon. That would be 1 month, right?
Yes.
The couple formulated secret plans to meet on the north side of the river with the rising of the moon. See? Rising of the moon. The month was slow in passing, but finally the appointed date arrived. With the rising of the moon, the impatient young maiden silently paddled her lone canoe across the wide expanse of the river towards the meeting place. As her canoe landed on the opposite shore, her lover ran to meet her and caught her in his arms. This is my favorite part. As he clasped her tightly to his breast, a sound filled the air. It seemed to come across the water. The brave thought they had been discovered, as the sound came from everywhere, over their heads, around and around their bodies, and then beneath them in the water. It was the most beautiful and lovely music. The maiden knew her brave to be mystified, and to soothe his alarm, she explained about the mysterious music that seemed to come from the great river on certain moons. He was spellbound and thought because of their great love, the river was presenting them with a good omen.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there again.
Go ahead.
Because there's a few things about this part of the legend that we should probably identify.
Mm-hmm.
One, he doesn't know it. He doesn't know about the singing.
Right.
Okay, which would tell you that the singing happens on the south side
No,
and not the north side.
not
Because
necessarily.
he's on the north side and he's never heard the legend, and she's on the
But
south
he's
side.
not, he doesn't live on the north side of the river. He's from the north. That's what I was saying. We didn't find the location of the Timbuktuan tribe. He lived on a lake. It just said in here, on a lake to the north. So, meaning they're not based on the Manatee River.
Fine. Okay. Well, so I'll accept that premise, but he still doesn't know the legend, is what
Right.
I want to
Does
say.
not
So
know
it's
the
not.
music.
So, and then the second point would be that the legend itself, this is like a legend within a legend, right? It's very, very meta. Because she's talking, within this legend, which is about their love, she's talking about an older legend about the singing. So we can only assume that as this is being passed down, that unless these things are made up or whatever, that for the Calusa, the singing river was a legend that extends to before this story
Right.
becomes popular.
Right.
Because she tells him the story.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a story within a story. Ozymandias, if you will.
Did you just say something in English to me?
Ozymandias.
What's that?
It's I am Ozymandias, King of Kings. Okay, moving on. Continue.
You have to delete that.
Okay.
One of his awaiting bodyguards reminded him as to their necessity of leaving the area at once, before discovery. The maiden's canoe was set adrift in the great river to be carried down with the outgoing tide. Satisfied as to having left no sign of their departure, the old chief's daughter took one last look across the river towards her village and bade farewell to her home and family. The party wound its way through the hammocks and pines until they arrived at her brave's village on the lake. They were married, all with all the pomp and ceremony due to a chief's family. For a time, the young couple were very happy, but finally the bride yearned for her family and a drink from the medicine spring.
Let me stop for 1 sec. Okeechobee would be east, not north, right? So he's not talking about Okeechobee, right? Like you wouldn't say that that's a river to the north because we drive north to get to Bradenton, but you would drive east to get to.
Let me look, hang on.
Okay, I have a map of Florida right here. That might be, or you have it over there.
So no, Bradenton's actually to the north of the Okeechobee.
Right.
So,
So it definitely wouldn't be
the only
Lake Okeechobee that
Right.
they're talking about.
Right. I mean, it could be Lake Wales.
Okay.
But that's quite a ways away. You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
there are other bodies of water everywhere. I mean, there's the Manatee River. They could have been talking like something right off of the Tampa Bay. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But it doesn't say how far they traveled.
And we can only assume that there have to be lakes that aren't on the map that you're currently looking at, seeing that the next major town up is Lakeland.
Right.
So usually you don't have a lakeland without it being a land of lakes.
Well, maybe. It could have been. Could have been man-made lakes.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, well, I mean,
Ah. The Timbuktu Territory was in northern Florida.
so
So,
even
like,
more
Jackson-
north than just like you're talking Georgia border.
Georgia border.
So
The Timbuktuans, so my goodness, can you imagine all the miles that they traveled?
now
Wow.
I've done that stretch. I've hit that stretch on 95 and 4 going from from Georgia to Florida.
Wow.
And it is
So,
hours of nothing but Florida for driving, so I can imagine.
on foot.
Right.
They were the largest indigenous group in Florida and consisted of about 35 chiefdoms, 19,000 square miles for the Timbuktuan land.
Hmm.
That's incredible.
So what's the river that's mentioned right there?
St. John's River is mentioned.
But I saw something with an A, so 2 different rivers with an A right there.
It's stretched from the Alta Maha River and the Cumberland Island in present-day Georgia. I've been to Cumberland Island.
And as far south as Lake George.
And from the Atlantic Ocean west to the Asula River in the Florida Panhandle. So, I mean, it doesn't name a lake, however, not that I see.
Okay.
But, I mean, who knows?
And probably not overly important to the legend.
Yeah, right. But, I mean, interesting enough to mention where they were geographically.
Right, and also the size, because the way that, and maybe this is just our Lee County centric, but I've always gotten the impression that pre-Seminole, the Calusa were the big boys in town. But at least geographically, it looks like the Timbuktuan were
Well, and the
were
size,
bigger.
that's a big size. You
Yeah,
know?
that's a lot, you know?
It's a lot, for sure. And it's important to note that at one point, all of the Florida Native Americans became Seminoles.
Right.
They were taken over and all became Seminoles.
Now,
Not all.
now I remember on one of the things we had talked about this, whether it was a rebranding or whether they were taken over. In other words, were there Seminoles
No,
that didn't take
I think
over,
we
and
found that
we
it was a
discovered that it was a rebranding.
Right.
So, the end of this legend, not to leap forward,
Go ahead.
ends with unification,
Mm-hmm.
with these 2 tribes coming together. So maybe that's the birth of the Seminoles.
Maybe. Quite
So-
possibly. I don't think so.
But either way, we're getting this legend from the Calusa perspective.
We're getting this legend.
Because it doesn't say anything about how his parents reacted to him bringing this random chick home.
Right, exactly. No, it's totally Calusa based. It doesn't say how it was passed down or anything like that.
Now, I remember when I was researching with my son for a project he was doing on the Calusa, he found that the Calusa would often go into the north, war with tribes that were there, or maybe it was the tribe that was there, and would enslave whoever they captured in battle, which was my son's argument for why the slave trade was already here before the white man crossed the pond. So that would make sense if they're pretty much like the only major tribe in that area that we're talking about, that they were warring with the Timbuktuan.
Sure. Where I don't remember where we saw that they were warring, that they were at war with each other. It's in one of our reference materials.
It is, and I think that as we're going forward, and we're having a very Romeo and Juliet idea here, and the fact that the father was like, absolutely not, like, well, Dad, why won't you let her marry, the other guy, the guy from across the river?
Oh, I found
Unless the tribes themselves were
I
not.
found it. Yeah. So
Okay.
let me keep reading
Okay.
the remainder of this, and all will be
Got it.
revealed.
All right.
Okay, so obviously she missed her family and wanted a drink of the river or from the medicine spring. And more than anything else, she longed to hear again the beautiful music emanating from the great river on certain moons. She told her husband of the custom that whosoever shall drink the water of the medicine spring will always return, and if one has ever heard the mysterious music of the river, could never be satisfied until it was heard again.
Can I stop you right there?
Yes,
I know
you
we're. I just want to say we like I said, we did do the tripping on Legends with kids, and my daughter was obsessed.
Oh God, I remember. Yeah.
Because she got some of the water in her mouth, and rather than being scared of the many diseases she might get for getting some of that water in her mouth, instead she was scared she would never want to.
She would never be
leave.
happy again.
She would never be happy again unless she was in Bradenton.
I want to be happy.
And I try to encourage her to think that, like, no, being in Florida makes you not happy.
Oh.
But she was freaked out for at least the next 2 days. So continue.
Poor thing. Okay, her brave knew then that she would someday return to her village. The old Caloose chief mourned for his absent daughter, but knowing the way of the great river, he knew that she would be unhappy and return to his home. After a time,
He would pull out "I told you so."
right?
Go ahead.
After a time, the young brave's father died, and he was made chief of the Timucuan tribe. He traveled to his father-in-law's village to ask permission of the old chief to return and settle on the banks of the great river near the medicine spring. The old chief refused to settle.
The north side? We're imagining that he's saying?
Yes.
Like to settle on the north side.
On the north side.
Okay.
The old chief refused his son-in-law as he couldn't find it in his heart to forgive him for taking his daughter. A battle was fought and many braves died. A truce was formed after nearly half of each tribe had been killed. In the peace truce, it was decided that the old Calusa chief was to become head of both tribes and rule until his death. Then his son-in-law, the young Timucuan chief, would become the ruler in his stead. From this union of these two young lovers would spring the future ruling royalty. The couple lived happily ever after, of course, and were free to drink from the medicine spring and to live on the banks of the great river of the mystic music. Now I'm going to read you the note, because this is relevant as well. The legend that I just read is an embellished version of the one written by Joseph Simpson in his History of Manatee County, written in 1915. Simpson states, "This beautiful legend has been handed down from one Indian tribe to another, from generation to generation, for 200 years or more, which has been lately brought to light through an interview with a one-armed Indian who was wounded at Bradenton Castle in 1855. The legend was related by Reverend E.F. Gates of Manatee. The Indian spring in Manatee and the location of the mystic music across the wide river at Rocky Bluff are real enough, as were the two Indian tribes. The legend fits the facts. Was it a true story? I like to believe it was."
That was the Redder commentary, not yours. At the end, the very end.
How do you know?
Because I've read that.
I'm just
Nothing
kidding.
says. And we've also recorded it 5 times.
Right?
So we have one-armed man to the Reverend.
One-armed man, yep. So the one-armed Indian told it to Simpson.
To Simpson.
So
Simpson tells it to...
Simpson wrote about it
in
in History of Manatee County in 1915. The legend was related, excuse me, by Reverend E.F. Gates of Manatee. It doesn't say when, but we know that the Gates family settled Manatee County, right?
Yep.
So we know that they were told by somebody, but they settled and they passed it along.
They passed it along.
Right.
And it eventually gets to...
Joseph Simpson.
Joseph Simpson.
Right.
Who eventually he gets to...
Well, nobody. I mean, he wrote this history, and then
Well, that's what I'm
this
saying.
book.
I just can't remember the...
Joe and Livy Warner wrote about this based upon his History of Manatee County in 1915, and then they embellished what I just read, but they don't say exactly what they embellished.
Right.
You know?
And so this is really like the internet before the internet, because we've got like 5 different sources that are commenting on that and kind of adding their own stuff to it. Oddly enough, and I wasn't even really able to find any like concrete names. We don't know the name of the chief. We don't know the name of the blushing bride, and
Which
we
is
don't
so
know
sad.
the
That's lost to
Timucuan
history, you know?
Timucuan brave. So if someone else is able to find that, and we have done, like I said, we did the most research for this one, in that we actually went out and did research in the libraries, tried to get to the Rocky Bluff Library, but we still haven't been able to get there. Hoping that they might have, especially Bradenton time stuff, but there is very little information. Now, I would imagine that maybe the path we can take for this is the list of chiefs of the Calusa.
Where do you even go for that?
Well, there's a little thing called the internet, which I haven't been able to use to find yet, but maybe the approach is what we need to change on it. So.
Possibly. I mean, that would be interesting and would really tie everything together to get a timeline.
Right. So that's the primary legend.
That's the one that we find most often written about.
Now, this is not what we originally got. The original thing that we got was the cover of the book, like a photocopy of the cover of the book, and then another legend, or I should say, like a newspaper article. I think it was
a newspaper article
speaking of the legend. And that when it was presented, actually was a combination of the two. It seems
right,
because in that one they talk about a silver-haired woman and some other stuff having to do with it. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. That was and I believe that's in the binder that you have over there.
Mm-hmm. So this is.
Wait, I'm sorry, I've got it right here, honey.
So the original story that we got.
The music of the Manatee. So this is from. I'm not sure. It doesn't even say where is this from exactly.
That was just a research thing that I got. The reference might be on the second page. But the original thing that we read, the legend as originally appeared, was from Ghosts Don't Cross Water and Walls Speak.
Okay.
Which was written by Nan Russell. And so once again, that was a non-circulating book that we weren't able to get our hands on the whole thing. But in there, same things. It mentions the gates as being the passerons as a story. And this contains also the poem that you read when we were there.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, do you want to read what you have, or do you want me to tell you? Because I just found a little paragraph that kind of just ties together what we just talked about.
Yeah.
From the ancient Calusa Indians through the Seminoles, it was related the legend to the Manatee County pioneer settlers. This tale is bridged to the present by Miss Eva Gates.
So we see her name again.
Right, granddaughter of the pioneer Josiah Gates. And then she was, whenever this was written, she was teaching school in the Manatee. Since the dredging of the river, the music is not so loud as before, according to the listeners.
And so we're going to find that there's a lot of, this ongoing theme, if you will, of the modern day destroying the legend.
What do you mean modern day destroying the legend?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, they were talking there about the dredging of the river. Mm-hmm. We're also going to talk about the destruction of the spring.
Yes.
And how, they basically took something that was very important to the county.
Important, relevant.
I mean, made it so it was a destination, and then they kind of just were like, whatever. Need a road.
Right.
So let's kill that.
Let's kill that.
But anyway, there's another there, and I think it's in the Nan Russell refers to a silver-haired person rising from the water.
Well, where is that one?
That one's right there, but the writing is way too small.
Oh, okay.
But I remember this story, and I remember that being a point of contention with us of wait a minute, where does this blonde chick come from? Is she a ghost? Is she a? And like I said to you, I remember doing research and finding reference to them also saying that the canoe is seen crossing the river.
Oh, really?
Or that a canoe is crossing the river.
I don't remember seeing that one.
I remember reading about that, and so I guess before we get into the R part of the legend.
I didn't know there was an R in the word
there
legend.
Is. Are you looking for the pictures of the from Indian Springs?
I am. I'm looking for the pictures of when we were at Indian Springs Park.
Because you're looking for the thing where it talks about that little passage about Romeo and Juliet that you read?
That
the video?
And That, and I wanted to bring up how the Indian Springs history, the nameplates there, didn't name the Timucuan Indians. They named the Toboggan Indians, remember?
Right, there was a
The
different name given for the...
So I just thought that was an interesting little fact to bring up.
So, just very quickly, we can talk about like Native American legends
Okay.
in general, because I've heard this scenario. There you go, golden-haired chick, right?
Yeah. I'll read that.
Okay. This idea of water, and water being kind of the primary, obviously there are Native American legends that talk about higher powers, right? That talk about like the spirit of the bear or the spirit of the wolf and those kinds of things, and creation legends and things like that.
Always very organic in nature, right?
Always very nature-based.
Right.
Right. So nature in nature, if you will.
Nature in nature. What would you call that?
Nature in nature? I don't know. I like that.
Nature.
But that's like the legends that seem to be more almost like their version of folklore, and their, as opposed to legends or myths, or stuff that the religion is based on, stories of things that have happened to them. There's a very strong emphasis on water.
Okay.
Lakes and ponds, like that's where things happen. And there's a lot of ones that are passed down that are more modern than that one, that usually have to do with opposing forces and young maidens.
Really?
So there's a lot. So there's a lot of a very typical theme. Like if we were
did you
going
find
to
this in Massachusetts?
yes,
As well? Okay.
Massachusetts, and I've actually posted this. It was an old article of mine that went through some of these that I've reposted a few times. That maybe we can, when we repost this, when we post the episode, we can repost that or put it in the description of it so people can read
I've
it.
never read it before.
Thank you for all your support, then, I would have to say. But there is a theme of taking the maiden.
Okay.
And sometimes it is...
Isn't that throughout history period?
Yes.
Not necessarily just Native American based.
Nope, not at all. Yeah,
Right.
I would agree with
Yeah.
that. But these usually involve water, too. So
Okay.
it's kind of a combination of the two. And so it often involves either settlers who come across her beauty, and because they can't have her, they kill her. And so she's thought to haunt the river or the lake or whatever it might be.
So basically,
Or-
feminist oppression has been happening since the beginning of time.
Yeah, sure. And so I don't agree, only because I keep using the word chick. So obviously I'm, pretty advanced in my thinking. Or oftentimes it's girl pretty, hold two breast. But then it's the same kind of thing. I'm trying to be serious here. The same
No,
kind
I'm
of
sorry.
thing
Just being complimentary.
within the tribe. So sometimes it's like someone within the tribe who does the same thing, but almost always it's an opposing outside force, whether that's another tribe, whether that's the settlers, and there's a symbolism of that, of like the fertility of the tribe itself being impeded upon.
Okay.
And so you have this idea of the young maiden as the ongoing future of the tribe, right? That's the one that has the babies. It's the one who brings the next generation of natives in.
Okay.
The next generation of whatever that Indian tribe might be
Meaning
in.
she symbolizes
That
procreation.
rebirth,
Okay.
right? And then the stopping of that. So the killing of her.
Or the taking of her.
Well, it almost always ends with killing.
Okay.
Is the stopping of that. And her ghost would then symbolize like the echo of that culture still within our culture today. Does that make sense?
It does, but I don't.
And so I think that's where I think it's the heart of the spreading of the legend. It's supposed to be this whole, they've taken our future, but we're still kind of echoing through time these stories.
Okay. I mean, I guess that can be said about any kind of urban legend that you really talk about, is it always takes a piece of wherever it's from, wherever it originates from. It takes a piece of the culture that it stems from. And there's that little piece that's lost to time forever It only exists within the legend. Do you know what I'm saying?
I got you, and I think that when you view this legend through the prism of like what history tells us about relations between, especially settlers and
Right.
Native Americans,
Right.
that even if the theme of take the girl, kill the girl is universal through all cultures, I think maybe it takes on a different meaning in this particular instance.
Is it because it's
Because it does
one culture to another, or same culture?
Yeah,
Taking the girl, you mean?
yeah. Well,
or-
no, I think because it's basically, creating a template for genocide. It's basically telling you about the killing of one culture for the sake of another culture. Now, I've seen stories of take the girl,
I don't
kill the
agree
girl.
with that for this legend at all.
Oh well, not the Singing River one.
Oh, which one are you
I'm talking about the theme of
Take the girl,
Native
okay.
Americans, right? So if we have that idea, which is going to be relevant to the next part of the legend that we're going to talk about, right? Mm-hmm. But if we take this, that idea, or at least hold it kind of in that light, and we look at the differences with this legend is more of a unification legend, right? So
sure.
it's even though he takes the girl, he doesn't kill the girl,
And he didn't really take her. She went willingly.
right?
You know what I mean? So completely different kind of
Right.
legend.
Well,
than
right, but
take the
unless
girl,
you're
kill the girl.
dad, in which case he took the girl,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because it is a Calusa legend, and so like from their eyes, it would be that he took his daughter.
But that's not. But isn't that funny to think about? Because it's being
Right.
told from the closest standpoint, but it also says in the legend that she wanted to go with
Yes,
him.
she is the one that
You know what I
defies
mean?
daddy and
Right.
crosses the
Runs
river.
away.
Runs
Right,
away.
yeah.
So I think that's where the difference of it is between other things. Like they make reference to it in Indian Springs. They make reference to it in other places, the Romeo and Juliet. But this is not Romeo and Juliet. This is a happy ending.
It is a happy ending.
This is
yeah.
happy. This is like
Well,
a longing
besides
to
the
go
war
home.
that killed half of each tribe.
Well, yeah, but they're nameless people. They're nameless, faceless
Collateral
people. Like they
damage,
would be a
right?
subplot in this
Collateral
movie.
damage for this one true great love.
And what does it do? It creates the most powerful Native American tribe in
Florida?
Well, definitely in Florida, if not the South, right?
Okay. I'm not sure. I don't know my Native
So-
American history like I should, but
I don't either, so I can be totally hyperbolic and say that this is the greatest tribe ever.
hashtag go Calusa. All right. So,
Hashtag white man's ignorance.
all right. So wait a minute. So what is this mystic?
Wait a minute, not all Indians are the same? They had tribes?
Oh, that was.
I know. Well, at what point did you realize that there were like different tribes and that they didn't get along? Because for me,
Oh,
I would
really?
honestly say and we were submerged in Native American culture. I knew there were different tribes, but I thought it was all one big happy family until I was like doing research about Pukwudgies
Honestly,
and
I've
Bridgewater
been-
Triangle stuff.
So I've been reading historical fiction since I was little. It's like my favorite genre. But once I be reading historical fiction, knowing it's a made-up novel, I would go then and research from there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of it was the Wild Wild West or the settlers coming in. There's different tribes and the things that happened between the settlers and the tribes. And I would go and I would research, like, okay, well, what is this tribe? Using my handy-dandy internet. And not really delve into, culture and everything like that.
We didn't have that when I was a kid, but continue.
I know, you poor little thing. You had the little cubes that you'd move with your finger. And
Yes.
So I knew at an early age that there were different tribes. They warred with each other, and then we warred with them, and yeah.
I was going to say, I think I understood the idea of tribes. Like, I understood, but in a very broad sense, like the Cherokee, the Pueblo, you know what I'm saying? The Aztec, like the Algonquin. So I didn't
You're
even
saying-
understand in my own area what the Algonquin political system was in terms of I didn't know that there was a Wampanoag, you know what I'm saying? And then the other tribes that are in.
I see. You're saying the sub-tribes of the major,
Yeah.
there was
Yeah,
the
but then
great
also that
Native American
it wasn't a
nations.
homogeneous group, that it had all of the drama of any nations that are next to each other. until I was much older. Like and maybe that's just a difference, like a half generational idea of the way that we were taught about Native Americans.
Possibly.
Because number one being that we would never have called them Native Americans; they were Indians.
Right.
So,
Right.
were you taught Native Americans or Indians?
Indians.
You were taught Indians. Okay.
Probably not Native Americans until high school.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But I went to a Catholic school too, so things were different.
All right. And they're generally much more progressive in the Catholic school system.
Not so much.
I know I was being sarcastic.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But just sarcasm doesn't come over podcast very well sometimes.
I think that people generally come from a state that he's being sarcastic all the time. This will be easier.
Where does this come from that I'm holding in my hand? That's what I want to know.
I got
Music
it.
of
I
the Manatee.
can't remember it was a document that I found in the archives that I was able to print off, but
Wow.
it didn't have a reference to what book it was.
So it's interesting though. The title is Mystic Music of the Manatee. And this again goes through the Indian legend of what I just read, essentially, pretty much. What I do want to read here, mysterious legend handed down to them. A legend handed down to them from the ancient Clusa Indians who lived in the vicinity of the Manatee prior to and during the Columbian period when the sounds had their traditional beginning. So what exactly is the Columbian
Yeah, I don't understand
period?
that. Well, that would be Columbus coming.
Okay.
But I don't understand what that means, like where it says who had their traditional beginning, because that makes it sound as if the singing river had its beginning in Columbus's time.
That's what that makes it out to seem.
That's what that makes out seem, but then this sounds like it's
Right.
much like
All right, so let me read the rest. So
All right.
many years ago, so the legend runs, a strange craft with huge wings came gliding up the river as if in great fear. Soon others followed in swift pursuit, and the watchers from the shores say many queer parcels dropped over the sides of the leading vessel. All except 2 of the Spaniards, for so they were, went ashore in canoes. Then from below deck, a maiden whose skin was whiter than the skin of the Spaniards, with golden hair appeared. In her hand she held a strange object from which she drew weird and lovely sounds. As the craft sank below the surface of the river, she still played as if to warn away all trespassers. Each year, in the dark of the moon in May, is heard again as the plaintive notes of the golden-haired maiden as she sank beneath the waves. Unfortunately, the rest of it I cannot read, but it ends with buried there. And this is from the ancient Clusa Indians through the Seminoles. This was related to the Manatee County pioneer settlers. And that's where we see the Gates family come in again.
okay.
So referenced in that material.
So this is almost like a mid-legend. So that seems to talk about the singing river, but doesn't talk about the love.
Right.
Or,
This
or I should say, doesn't talk about the healthy love
right.
of because it much more is the legend of the pirates. It seems.
Legend of the Pirates, in which we haven't even touched upon yet.
Well, that was going to be
sub-legend.
that was going to be the transition.
Okay. To transition.
Yes.
Okay.
So we discovered what that is in reference to seems to be another legend which looks to explain the singing, but it takes place hundreds of years later, so it doesn't really acknowledge
It doesn't
how the
acknowledge the
legend
two lovers.
existed for
Yeah, right.
or even like existed before the lovers.
Right.
So would you like to read about the
About the pirate part of
yes,
things?
R.
Arr. So I'm taking this from the book again, and this is from the chapter that is entitled Rocky Bluff. So what this says is, this tiny community's past has been infused with mystery due to the mystic music that emanated from the rocky area of the river. Many explanations have been forthcoming about the periodic sounds that were heard by a few patient folk. Early historian Jack Leffingwell wrote in the Bradenton Herald in 1945.
P.S.
Uh-huh.
Not unable to find the actual paper,
Right.
the actual article.
Unless we go to the Rocky
This
Bluff
shows
website.
up right, and really like go through the microfiche of like that entire year.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that would
which
be cool.
it would be very cool, but we've been able to do that. But this reference, these are really being like, you've got to look at the dates of everything because they all seem to be referencing the same thing. So it's who's borrowing from who. That's the issue.
Right.
Continue. Sorry.
The sound is that of a musical humming, like a telephone pole loaded with wires. He also describes what he thinks was the answer to the mysterious humming. My own honest opinion is that it is the chemical action between the tannic acid from the palmetto roots washed down during the rainy season coming in contact with the fuller's earth.
Okay, say that one more time.
Okay, all right.
And say that slowly because we're getting a scientific or a pseudoscientific explanation
Which we
for
have
it.
no idea what the credentials of Mr. Leffingwell are.
Right.
So, my own honest opinion is that there's a chemical action between the tannic acid from the palmetto roots washed down during the rainy season coming in contact with the fuller's earth, which covers the river bottom in that locality.
So what he's saying is there's a chemical reaction, and that chemical reaction creates a low hum.
A low hum.
That seems ridiculous to me.
It does
Okay.
seem ridiculous to me.
I mean, I'm not a scientist.
I mean, I can understand a chemical reaction noise, but it's not typically a hum.
Because also you're talking about a reaction that happens under the surface of the water, right? So it wouldn't seem as if it were surrounding, the sound would be surrounding
But
it.
at the same time, there is a spring, so we know that it's going to be acidic, right? Most
Do we?
springs are acidic.
When I think of springs, I think of them as salt.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. no,
Like
I
that's where their
think it's
healing
like-
powers come from.
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I've always thought that it contained more acid base than salt. But I'll look that up. Anyways,
Acid-based salt.
acid-based salt?
Because acid plus base equals salt.
Oh.
Continue.
Okay. Whatever the reason, the explanation of the mystic sound of Rocky Bluff was told in a fanciful tale by Captain Charles Moore, who was a senior lighthouse keeper at Egmont Key for 40 years.
Which is also an extremely haunted place, but we really can't get access to.
He delighted visitors and picnickers to the island with his stories. His tale was as follows. In the late 1700s, Tampa Bay was a base for Pascual Miguel, known along the west coast as El Carnicero, or the Butcher.
The Butcher.
He was not a romantic figure, as fiction paints a pirate leader, but rather a ruthless, dirty, smelly, bloodthirsty rascal. His ship was a goleta, or schooner of light draft that could keep during an emergency, be propelled by oars or sweeps. A 12-pounder called Long Tom was her only armament. Miguel and his gang of cutthroats had 3 bases of operation. A lookout tower was maintained on the north end of Anna Maria Island, where watch was kept for possible victims. A base at the mouth of the Terracea Bay, and the main one located 8 miles up Manatee River at Rocky Bluff. At the latter hideout, a large flat rock with a picture of a ship roughly carved on it was next to the shore on the north side of the river. By the way, small little intervene here. The Rocky Bluff is not so rocky. We did not find it.
It's pretty much, we were bluffed.
We were bluffed.
We were bluffed.
The bluff was a bluff. Unless somebody has taken the bluff away, there's no bluff. that we can see.
Although when we were there with the kids and it was daytime, Devin did comment that it did look higher.
Oh, really?
Right. Which of course is a relative term with Florida terrain,
Right.
but it looked
Exactly.
higher.
Like, it was like 12 inches higher than.
I mean, it did seem, I could see what he was saying
Okay.
when I was
When
looking
he
through
had
those high-def
binoculars,
binoculars,
yeah,
yeah.
So, the pirate leader basically kidnapped a girl named Carlotta, and she was the daughter of the commandant at Pensacola. He was so very happy, yada yada. He carried Carlotta to his Terracea Bay, where he sought to conquer the unhappy girl. We won't go into what conquer the unhappy girl means.
But it's hot,
As far as pirate romance goes,
Yes.
for sure.
for sure.
Totally. The commander, when his daughter failed to arrive as scheduled, dispatched several ships to search for the missing girl. When Miguel sighted the search party, He put Carlotta on board his boat and fled up the Manatee River, where he was confident a larger vessel could not follow. He lived aboard his ship with Carlotta for many days while the search went on. His beautiful prisoner became despondent and despaired of being rescued. In order to keep her happy, Miguel created an aeolian, I believe that's the word, harp made of steel strings strung across her porthole for amusement. When the wind played against the strings, it set up a vibration which sounded like a musical hum.
So there we have a musical instrument, even though that's like a guitar. That's the cause of the music.
This particular.
So it's right. So it's pretty much stealing. No, you silly Native Americans! It was a pirate that did it.
Right. Exactly.
So, and that's also the reference to the golden-haired woman rising from the water.
Hang on.
In the early, I'm sorry. Continue.
Nowhere have I said that Carlotta had golden hair.
Okay, but I mean, generally, if you're going to abduct a Commodore's daughter, she's probably blonde.
Really?
That's pirates seem to like blonde girls. I think I read that somewhere in the pirate code.
I think you're just mixing.
Set down by Bartholomew and.
Oh my god. All right, so.
Okay.
After Miguel tired of the seclusion of the upper Manatee River, he prepared to set sail with his crew for further adventure. Realizing she was leaving the area forever, Carlotta decided to go do away with herself. She managed to force a small hatch leading to the bilge of the ship. On the ship's bottom, she drilled many holes with an auger that was lying nearby in a wooden box. The scuttled ship went down to a watery grave, taking along Carlotta. The crew escaped to shore and fled into the woods, never to be heard from again. Today, during the full moon of the months of May, June, and July, on a still night, one can hear the aeolian harp being vibrated by the tides, playing a sorrowful song for the lost Carlotta.
So, I've been rejected by women before.
No.
But no one has ever said, I'm going to sink an entire pirate ship and do away with myself.
Just to get away from you.
Just to get away from you. They've had some creative ways, but...
They did say it was dirty and smelly and bloodthirsty. And
now that they have told me, that I am dirty and smelly and bloodthirsty.
Bloodthirsty too?
But never, and so now I'm going to use it. Oddly enough, I think that I knew someone named Auger who told me that.
Oh my god.
Too. A lot of French Canadians in Manchester. So.
So here's more.
Okay.
The next part of the story actually happened and was remembered by many who lived in the Ellington area, which is right next to Bradenton. In 1892, a strange black schooner sailed up the Manatee River, passing all the settlements without hailing or stopping. She arrived at Rocky Bluff at dusk and cast anchor. During the night, an explosion was heard by the people of Ellington, and the next morning, a party of men, led by Dudley Patton, journeyed upriver to investigate the blast. Upon reaching Rocky Bluff, they discovered a hole where their favorite rock with the roughly carved ship on top, near the shoreline, had been blasted into many small pieces. It was evident from the hole that a square object had been removed from the sand beneath where the rock had once stood. The mysterious ship had departed silently in the night. Many wondered if the ship had been found a hidden treasure left there by the famous pirate Pasquale Miguel.
Otherwise known as Smelly.
Smelly, dirty, bloodthirsty.
Right, Captain Bloody Smelly.
So, they've got an interview in here, about somebody that story was passed down to. So, just all very interesting things, and all really goes to the validity of the Singing River is a real thing. The Singing River
and that's, if our mission statement is that every town is every area is molded by the legends, that this is a great example.
It's a great example.
And the author of that book, the couple, Warner, use this legend to tell really the history of Manatee County.
They do.
So that's a great example.
They mold it around. And Another thing to point out too, and maybe not even as relevant for the legend itself, but everything in this area, and I had the kids
Yeah,
point
right.
this
You
out
had the
too,
kids do this.
was named Manatee or Indian
or
or
spring.
something like river.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just everything was tied to the
I
Manatee
mean, for
River.
that
Everything.
whole county, it seemed.
Right. Absolutely.
And then we started
everywhere we
noticing them in our county as well.
went. Yeah. It's just neat how it extends and how it shapes the community 300, 400, 500 years later, you know?
And that's a really good place for us to stop the episode. This is Chris Balzano. Natalie is not with me right now. But we got some feedback about the length of the episodes themselves. So we decided to kind of try to stick with 1 hour format. This episode was recorded all at once. It was 2 hours. So we're like, you know what? Why don't we split it up so that we have the background and the legend itself and our commentary on the legend on one episode, and then kind of what happened when we get out there. So you're going to have to wait, I'm sorry, for episode 13, which is when we actually hit the field. And then pretty soon after that, we'll actually hit up episode 14, which is when we went to the same location, the same Singing River, with 5 kids, and kind of our approach to how you can possibly, if you were looking to Legend Trip, find some things and kind of incorporate family, incorporate children, get an educational aspect to it as well. So it should be interesting. Please feel free, or please do, follow us on any of our multimedia platforms. You can get these episodes on Google Play, on iTunes, anywhere where you Stitcher, anywhere where you get your podcasts. It's just Tripping on Legends. Our Facebook is facebook.com/Tripping on Legends. And our Twitter accounts are I'm at Spooky Balzano, and Natalie is at Nene My Friend. So join us next week. Hopefully we can get the episodes up quicker for you guys. And until then, I am Chris Balzano for Natalie Crist saying I hope all of your trips are legendary.